Hey folks, I promise you this is not Full Metal Jacket, although I certainly look like Private Pile. And it is not a Terry Gilliam movie, although my camera is sort of tilted sideways. But I wanted to make a slightly different video today. I've become addicted to making videos. And I saw a video today by DJ Ware, Don Ware, who I find really entertaining. He has a lot to say. He's a graybeard in the industry, and he was talking today about the books that taught him what he knows, or at least I'm not sure if it was, a canonical list of the books that taught him what he knows, but the books that he liked to read, he liked to recommend other people for computer stuff. And I thought to myself, I have a very different list of books that I would recommend, although I have read a lot of the books that he recommended. But I think the practice of programming and the practice of any tech effort is a slightly more personal endeavor than might be displayed in books just about programming, although I've read a bunch of those as well. So I wanted to show you the books that I consider important or considered seminal. Some of them aren't, but most of them are. Most of them in this list are seminal that I've read coming up. And I'm a graybeard as well. I'll say it, but I'm a slightly younger graybeard than DJ Ware, but not that much younger. I think I love them all. I'll tell you. I'll let you know if I don't love one of them. The first book I want to talk about is called The Soul of a New Machine, and it is written by an author named Tracy Kidder. It was written in 1981, and it is about a team at the company Data General who is tasked with building sort of a stopgap interim machine, a mini computer that is. It really doesn't break any ground. It's sort of a. They need some to tick some marketing check boxes. I think it from 16 to 32 bits or something like that, but really it's not 32 bits. And it is a book about project management and motivating teams, and it is utterly fascinating. It is about how to motivate people, the importance of money or the lack of importance of money when you want to motivate people. The people that are tasked with doing this, there's this concept of signing up. And when you sign up, you're not signing up in order to make a bunch of money or in order to start a company or in order to get fame or any of that stuff, that you might consider fundamental to motivation in humans. In this case, the people, the pool of people whom are volunteering for this, their reward is to do it again. So the idea is that if they do this crazy effort, which takes forever, I shouldn't even say it takes forever. It takes many man hours. They don't sleep much during this hectic period, and they have to produce. Their bosses have promised an outcome that's almost impossible, and they manage to do it more or less. And there's lots of super interesting engineering stuff in it, like hardcore, let's take a microscope to the PCB sort of engineering in it. But Tracy Kidder is, I don't know exactly. I guess he may have been a programmer at some point. But he has a great writing style, and it's super engaging. It is not boring at all, and it's about teams. Anyway, it's a lot different than the current. There are a lot of tales like WeWork or even fucking Apple, whatever. This is not about that. It is not. I mean, it's you could be excused for not squinting and not being able to tell the difference, but when you squint at it. There are very different stories. This is a story about a team who is motivated by by sheer force of will and pride. And it's really cool. Really, really cool story. Second book I want to talk about is called Masterminds of Programming. Let's see. I think I have it up here. Do I have it up here? I do. There it is. And Masterminds of Programming, Conversations with the Creators of Major Programming Languages. So inside of it, they interview, it doesn't have an author, it just has some editors who I'm not familiar with, but they interview the folks who made BASIC, who made SQL, C++, Perl, Python, Java, C#, Haskell, you know, incredible people. I think this book is important for although all the other stuff is super interesting, and all these other interviews, you know, sort of origin stories and stuff of people. The one chapter that really caught my attention when I read it was by Donald Chamberlain, who's one of the progenitors of SQL. I don't think he invented it necessarily, but popularized it. And it is hilarious to listen to him rant about how people use SQL. He's like, look, man, we made that language for like, people like type in. I didn't mean for it to be templated. I didn't want you to write programs to generate it. That's ridiculous. It's great. It's great. Fantastic. Highly recommended. Highly entertaining. All right. Now we get into some maybe less programmery things, but still technical. Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Robert Heinlein. Robert Heinlein was a science fiction author from the late 30s, I think, maybe early 40s, until he died in the early 80s. A really, everybody knows who Robert Heinlein is. I don't have to tell you who he is. Let me get the medicine out. Okay. This book is a allegory to the Revolutionary War, American Revolutionary War. It's about a group of I guess you'd call them inmates, who are on the moon, Luna, and they have been their progenitors, either them or their progenitors, were banished to the moon at some point. So the moon is kind of like Australia in a way. I know it's confusing. I get it. It's both Revolutionary War and Australia, but the moon is not really an autonomous, governed society. I mean, it is, because no one cares about them up there. They have no rights, and they have no access to voting people out of office or anything. They're just, and they're also instrumental in supplying ore. Is it ore? I guess it's ore to Earth. That is valuable to, there's some world government on Earth, or I forget the entire machinations of the politics side, but so it is a really interesting story just from a political standpoint, because it's a very allegorical thing. It's pretty cheesy. I mean, by today's standards, you read it and it's got sort of these, hey bub, how you doing, sort of things in it, but it's also really kind of like forward thinking, because the protagonist is a Puerto Rican who's missing an arm, and he's also a hardware engineer, and he is tasked with fixing. There's a computer on the moon that is vital to the workings of the slingshot, which gets Earth its ore, and the computer is so powerful that it also handles a bunch of other tasks, like things like it's easy to do, like the telephone system. Basically, it does everything on the moon, and so the computer is important in this. And there comes a revolution. The computer becomes important in the revolution, as well as the protagonist, the Puerto Rican guy with one arm, and then there's an allegory to Ben Franklin guy, and anyway, it's nice. It's a great story, but it also has some really interesting practical approaches to engineering problems, like hard science in it. It's pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, and it also talks about, I mean, sort of the overarching theme of the book is AI ethics. So it's, yeah, still interesting today. Okay, Scanner Darkly. A Scanner Darkly. Okay, these people behind here, this is Woody Harrelson, Keanu Reeves, and what's his name? Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. This movie, it was made into a movie, is a good movie, although it is somewhat distracting because they used rotoscoping on top of it. It was claimed to be because one of the principal elements of the movie is this thing called a scramble suit, which is meant to disguise its wearer, and it constantly shifts into different people and stuff, whatever. I mean, it's sci-fi. But the more interesting thing about the movie is that it is a story about addiction. And I think, although I think we don't talk about it a lot, I imagine that because programming is such a monomaniacal effort, it attracts a certain kind of person, and I think it attracts people that are in danger of becoming addicted, not just to programming, but to drugs and to love and to gambling and all kinds of things, because the reward structure is set up in programming such that if you spend arbitrary amounts of time doing, rote things, you'll be rewarded. And that's a definition of addiction, if I've ever heard one. But it's also just a beautiful story about recursion, which, if you watch it, you'll find out. Philip K. Dick, of course, it's a Philip K. Dick story. It's, it's Blade Runner-esque, and it's meant to be. It's a science fiction story, but it's not. It's very, very loosely dressed science fiction. It's basically a story about him, like what he went through with an addiction to meth, and it's also hilarious. Oh, it's so funny. It's super funny. I mean, the book is super funny. The movie's also super funny. And although it's Keanu Reeves, look, I get it. You don't have to like Keanu Reeves, but he's pretty good in it. I mean, and it couldn't have got. That's what I heard from the director. The director is a guy from Austin. I forget his name, but the director said he couldn't have got it made without Keanu Reeves. So, thumbs up, Keanu Reeves. Excellent. Anyway, wonderful book. My favorite book of all time, I think. Okay, so Code. Code is another book. It's Code, the Hidden Language of Computer, Hardware, and Software by Chuck Petzold, who was like a number 7 employee at Microsoft, or, I'm exaggerating. I have no idea what number he was, but down there, like in the originals of Microsoft, and of course made bazillion dollars and then quit and wrote this book. And it is a tour de force on all the things that you don't know, that I don't know anyway. Like, how do computers do math? How do they do that? What is 2's complement? What's binary fucking coded decimal? How does this shit work? It's got pictures in it, these very simple pictures. It starts out with electronic circuits, and like you push a switch and this one lights up, and then moves on to scary circuits in there. And it is a fascinating book. For some definition, fascinating. You have to be in the right mood, but it's no Scanner Darkly, put it that way, but it's still very good. Okay, Cuckoo's Egg by Cliff Stoll. This one I couldn't say, I said I'd tell you that I don't love books. This one I don't really love. As a matter of fact, it's been so long since I read it, I barely remember it. But one thing I do remember about it was this guy, Cliff Stoll, although I hesitate to glorify this book because I think it is one of those cases where Cliff Stoll just kind of I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but I think Cliff Stoll just kind of got carried away, and as we all do, and went after this hacker that got into his system, and then, you know, took the hacker down, but then published a book about it and whatever, you know. But the part that I find so interesting about the story is Cliff Stoll was an astronomer, if I remember right, and he was tasked with, he was a system administrator just on the side, you know. This is like in the 80s, and so he sort of saw these signs of someone fucking with his computers. So he went and sort of investigated and pulled on the sweater thread that would lead him down some rabbit hole that would last for a year, whatever. And it's the story of him turning from this, you know, pretty, you know, hippie, yo man, with y'all just do whatever we want, man, you know, like it's just computers, like we're just into we're gonna get this motherfucker. Like, it's that story, which is cool, you know. It's interesting. Okay, so Hackers, another book that, I mean, it's interesting, definitely worth a read. Definitely, you just have to read it. You have to, by Stephen Levy, and it's just classic stories about the genesis of personal computers. Like, I have it here, as a matter of fact, there it is. Oh, and here's Code, Chuck Petzold's book. And it talks about the Homebrew Computer Club and Leif Felsenstein and Apple and, you know, the genesis of Apple II Basic, and just all, this is a classic stuff. It's all the same stories that you might have heard in Triumph of the Nerds, the show, the PBS show, but in written form. And it's told again and told very entertainingly. It's not quite as funny as Triumph of the Nerds, but it's still very, very good. The next book, Now It Can Be Told. By Leslie Groves, the general who was in charge of the Manhattan Project. What a wonderful book. So good. It is about project management, as you might imagine. And what's super interesting about it is it goes into these nuts and bolts about, you know, the project itself and sort of the security stuff they had to go through, and the personalities involved in the folks that, the personalities involved in maintaining the facility, and the give and take between the scientists and the administration and the politicians and all that kind of stuff. And it is totally fascinating. If you read one book about project management, it is this one, because they pull it off. And God knows no one could have done this today. There's no way that in the current climate that this could have gotten done, but he did it. And but whatever you might think of the outcome, it is impressive, without a doubt. And of course, it's told from his side. It's the general in the army who's in charge of the project. There's probably some people who would like to have a word with his characterization of their behavior, but great, fantastic. Okay, next book. In the beginning was the command line. Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. In the beginning was command line. It was written, I think, in the mid-90s, maybe late 90s. And it is a sort of snapshot look at the world of personal computing at the time. And he's talking about his take, Neil Stephenson, the guy who wrote Snow Crash and whatever the cron thing is, and whatever. I stopped at Snow Crash because I don't have all month long to read a book, whatever. The Baroque Cycle, thick, whatever, way too big. Needs an editor. But this is funny as hell. He's just a funny author, so I'll just read a little bit of it to you. Imagine a crossroads where 4 competing auto dealerships are situated. One of them, Microsoft, is much, much bigger than the others. Started years ago selling 3-speed bicycles, MS-DOS. These were not perfect, but they worked, and when they broke, you could easily fix them. There was a competing bicycle shop next door, Apple, that one day began selling motorized vehicles, expensive but attractively styled cars with their innards hermetically sealed, so that how they worked was something of a mystery. Blah, 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 blah. With one exception, that is, Linux, which is right next door, and which is not a business at all. It's a bunch of RVs, yurts, teepees, and geodesic domes set up in a field and organized by consensus. The people who live there are making tanks. These are not old-fashioned cast-iron Soviet tanks. These are more like M1 tanks of the U.S. Army, made from space-age materials jammed with sophisticated technology from one end to the other. But they're better than Army tanks. They've been modified in such a way that they never, ever break down, are light maneuverable enough to use on ordinary streets, and use no more fuel than a subcompact car. These tanks are being cranked out on the spot in terrific pace in a vast number. They're lined up along the edge of the road, keys in ignition. And anyone who wants one can simply climb into it and drive it away for free. And then it talks about this. The group giving away the free tanks only stays alive because it's staffed by volunteers who are lined up at the edge of the street with bullhorns, trying to draw customers' attention to this credible situation. A typical conversation goes something like this. Hacker with bullhorn. Save your money. Accept one of our free tanks. It's invulnerable. It can drive across rocks. Swamps at 90 miles an hour while getting 100 miles to the gallon. Prospective station wagon buyer. I know what you say is true, but I don't know how to maintain a tank. Bullhorn. You don't know how to maintain a station wagon either. Buyer. But this dealership has mechanics on staff. If something goes wrong with it, my station wagon, take it off work, bring it here, pay them to work on it while I sit in the waiting room for hours listening to elevator music. Bullhorn. But if you accept one of our free tanks, we'll send volunteers to your house to fix it for free while you sleep. Buyer. Stay away from my house, you freak. That is genius. All right. He also tells a story about, hilarious story about how Unix is like a tool that he used as when he was briefly a contractor in college, called the whole hog. It's not like any other drill. All these other drills are toys. Whole hog. When the handle breaks on it, it's just a pipe that you can flute in such a way that you just stick it in. You just buy some more pipe. It's not a big deal. And it also is it will hurt you if you treat it, if you don't respect it. Wonderful story. Fun fact: Neil Stephenson also wrote at least most of his earlier books in Emacs. So there's that. Okay, so Notes from on the Ground, Doestoevsky. I don't mean to be pretentious here. I really don't. But it is a great story. It is about a narcissist who basically makes a big deal over nothing, lots of nothing, and describes the inner workings of his mind as all this nothing is happening. It sounds really simple. But it is terrifying. It's a terrifying story. And as you work with people, I think it is wise to expand your definition of what a person is. And you might not know they exist. They do. This is an example. This person exists somewhere. But also similar but funnier is, let's see, Confederacy at Dunces, John Kennedy Toole. It is about a hot dog vendor named Ignatius Riley, who has way completely outsized opinion of his intelligence, his also a narcissist, his ability, and seriously funny, but a lot like Notes from the Underground in that it is a the protagonist is not there can be no redemption for the protagonist. It takes place in New Orleans. Quite a great book. Okay, Sing Backwards and Weep. This is rather recent. Mark Lanegan, singer from the Screaming Trees, also in Queens of Stone Age for some period of time. It is a harrowing tale of drug abuse and desperation, but it is also full of second chances, and it's interesting story. Interesting story. You will not believe the abuse that his body was able to put up with. He recently died, so what are you going to do? But it's important because it's important to recognize that it's not all. You can fuck up a lot, and people will forgive you as long as you apologize and you mean it. So anyway, Object Primer, Scott Ambler. I don't have that with me. I should have it. It's somewhere around here. I found this book useful when I was learning about object orientation, 20, 25 years ago, whatever. I didn't know what it was, and I just needed a place to start, and it describes the whys of why you might want to, in a relatively brief and accessible way, why you would use objects, and not in any particular programming language, but just as a concept. But it also goes into the practice of gathering requirements for such a system, and it uses a system called CRC cards, which I had never heard of. The 4th edition, unfortunately, switches to UML, and it is terrible. But the 3rd edition, I've actually used that strategy to gather requirements for CRC cards, with note cards where you describe the responsibilities of some object or some user or whatever. It's quite interesting. So anyway, those are the books I love. Let me know if you have any other suggestions for books you love or not.